Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where I will give you advice on how to set your lineup, who to add off the waiver wire, and pretty much any fantasy advice you guys have at all. And I'm your host, Jeremiah Martinez. This is the Tuesday show. I will be doing the Tuesday show solo as for notice, and Anthony will join me every Friday. But man, we had quite a lot of fantasy performers in last night's Monday Night Football game. And the backfield, the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons were just, if you started any one of these guys, you had a pretty good night. I'm telling you that right now. You had a pretty good night. I know on Friday's show, Anthony and I said maybe you should sit Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman moving forward unless you have someone better. Well, me personally, I didn't have anyone better to start, so I started Devonta Freeman, and he gave me 26 points, and Tevin Coleman got 28. So I'm going to talk about the Devonta Freeman first. He was the stud. He was the star of the Atlanta Falcons backfield last season, and he was the number one top 5 fantasy running back last season. But he had his best game last night. He had 152 yards rushing, 55 yards receiving, and a touchdown through the air. And he got over 200 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. That is his best fantasy game performance, that is, of the season. Previous week against Oakland, he only had 93 yards rushing, which was a pretty moderate game on 17 touches. Okay, but you expect him more from someone in this backfield to perform against that Oakland Raiders defense. And against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was just completely shut down. So this was his best game. And moving forward, the Atlanta Falcons schedule, they have the Carolina Panthers. So that's a tough game for Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman at all. And they got the Denver Broncos right after that and the Seattle Seahawks. So for the next 3 games, Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman should be on the bench. I don't see either one of these backs performing like they did last night against these 3 tough defenses, because Carolina, Denver, and Seattle are toughest defenses to start against on fantasy football at all. And I do expect one of these running backs to emerge with more touches by week 7 in San Diego Chargers. But the fact that both of these guys, Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, they're having the work split for them. It worked last night against a terrible defense and the New Orleans Saints. I've been down on the Saints defense on my football show, and I'm still down on them on this show because defense does kind of matter in fantasy when you start people against defenses. But Devonta Freeman's performance was the best that I've seen since dating back to last year from him. He just was an absolute beast. And like I said, I would not start him against Carolina. I wouldn't start Tevin Coleman either. And both of them had really great games. And Tevin Coleman, he was someone that had a great fantasy day. He actually vultured 3 touchdowns on Devonta Freeman in the red zones. But Tevin Coleman, the way he ran also, he was an absolute beast as well. He only had 42 yards rushing on 12 attempts. He did average 3.5, but he had 3 touchdowns, and that is why he had quite a fantasy day. He also had 47 yards receiving. Tevin Coleman hasn't really done a lot on the ground. He is averaging 3.4 yards a carry, but he does have 4 touchdowns. 3 of them came last night. He does have 167 yards receiving, and both of these guys are in a passing offense. So they're going to get their touches if they're not on the ground. My only worry about the Atlanta Falcons backfield moving forward is, are they going to be behind in most of these games? Because when I'm looking at their schedule, looking forward, Carolina Panthers, the Denver Broncos, and the Seattle Seahawks, these 3 tough defenses, I don't know how this offense in general is going to perform. So it's tough for me to trust, this backfield and quarterback Matt Ryan. Julio Jones, I know he didn't really have quite, the game yesterday. But I would not sit Julio Jones. He is one of those guys you just don't sit. Mohamed Sanu did get hurt yesterday as well. He was practically a third receiver. He was emerging that way, and Jacob Tamme didn't do a whole lot either. So it was mainly the Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman show last night. And Matt Ryan also was a heck of a performer in fantasy. He only had 10 completions. He had 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that he continues his fantasy resurgence as well. And Matt Ryan, we talked a little bit about him on Friday's show, that he's someone that you should start moving forward, especially in this game. But looking at the Falcons' schedule, like I previously stated, it's going to be tough for me to start Matt Ryan against Carolina, Denver, and Seattle, because these are really 3 tough defenses. So Matt Ryan is someone that I'm very reluctant to start for the next 3 weeks, unless you don't have anyone better, then maybe you should start him. But Matt Ryan is someone you should avoid for the next 3 weeks. I would not look forward to starting him till week 7 against San Diego. We saw what Andrew Luck did against that defense. So that is the game I will look forward to starting Matt Ryan. And he had a great game yesterday as well. And he has 7 total touchdowns and 1 interception. So he's looking like one of the best fantasy quarterbacks this season so far. And speaking of other quarterbacks that played last night, Drew Brees also had a real good game. The Saints didn't have a good game, but he had a great game. The Saints offense has been one of the best so far this season in fantasy. Drew Brees did pass for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Mark Ingram was also someone that also got 100 yards total and a touchdown. He also did. I started him in my team, and he got me close to 20 points. But I think the ultimate surprise last night was Coby Fleener finally came alive. Coby Fleener, yes, we had so much high expectations for Coby Fleener to have a breakout fantasy season. And he did that. He had 11 targets last night. 11 targets. 7 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. He had a great game last night. His best fantasy performance of the whole entire year. And looking forward, Coby Fleener looks like he is someone that needs to be, in your lineup. It's been a really down year for the tight end position, like it always is. And someone actually did drop Coby Fleener in my league. And after this game, I'm going to try to get him on my team. I don't know if I'm going to get him because of the waiver position, but he is someone that I'm looking forward to if someone drops him in my league. I'm telling you right now, for those kicking themselves for dropping Fleener, man, you just got to be patient. That's the thing about fantasy. You have to be patient. You have to be patient in fantasy in general, unless, if you have a star running back or receiver, you got to be patient with them. And tight ends, you got to kind of have to be patient as well, because there's not a lot out there. There's only 3 for sure tight ends that you would start, and that is Gronkowski, maybe Jimmy Graham as of right now. And there's a lot of mid-tier guys that you can start in tight end. But, man, Coby Fleener looks like he's going to look like one of those breakout candidates in the tight end position. And like I said, Coby Fleener, if you guys are kicking themselves in the foot for dropping him, man, oh man. But for those of you who still have Coby Fleener or happen to get Coby Fleener in your lineup for after someone dropped him, he is playing the San Diego Chargers next week. So I think he's going to have a real good game. I think he's going to have a good game. He does have Drew Brees throwing the ball to him. I would put him in your lineup. I would put him in your lineup. But before we take our first break here, I want to get back to the Atlanta Falcons backfield here. So the backfield is something that I still don't really trust in fantasy. Both backs had a really great game for fantasy teams. But moving forward, I don't know if I can trust them. I don't know if I can trust them. Their schedule gets hard for the next 3 weeks. They do have San Diego week 7 and Green Bay week 8. So there's 2 games I can probably start them, but it's going to be hard for me to trust both these guys if they're in a timeshare. And I know both of these guys got theirs, but it is hard for me to trust them. Unless you don't have someone better on your team, I would start them. But if you do, I would just sit them out. They're both more useful for the flex position, but I wouldn't start them at your 1 and your 2 running back spots. So they are RB2s moving forward, both Tevin, Coleman, Devonta, Freeman, that is. But I would not expect too much from them for the next 3 weeks. These are tough defenses that these guys are playing. And I know they're in a passing offense, and they have chances to get yards in through the air. But it's going to be tough for me to see them score touchdowns against these guys. And touchdowns is the key stat in fantasy. So it's going to be hard for me to trust both Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman moving forward. But Coby Fleener, he's someone that I trust. Drew Brees and Matt Ryan, they're both guys that I trust. And, and that's all I have to say about the last night's Monday night game. But we're going to take our first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And I'm going to be talking about some top performers. And we'll be back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, and I'm going to talk about some top performers from this past weekend. And Marvin Jones, man, what a game he had against the Green Bay Packers. Over 200 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, so he got nearly for 30 points there. And looking at the Detroit Lions moving forward, they playing the Chicago Bears this Sunday, and I would start Matt Jones right there. Not Matt Jones, sorry. Marvin Jones. And Marvin Jones looks like he is emerging as one of the top fantasy receivers this season, and he looks like the number 1 guy. Golden Tate has had trouble getting going, and Marvin Jones has took all the targets, all the yards, all the stats, everything there. Matthew Stafford is throwing at him, and Marvin Jones, remember, he's a guy from Cincinnati. He was the number 2, number 3 guy over there for a while, and he finally is showing his talent with the Detroit Lions. And Marvin Jones has had he has a really productive season so far. Remember, he has 2 straight 100-yard games. He did have 100 yards against the Tennessee Titans the week prior in week 2. And then against the Indianapolis Colts, he did have 85 yards. So that was a modest game, but man, he has come on fire. And like I said, I would start him against the Chicago Bears, and I'm still not sure about the Philadelphia defense. They did shut down the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So I'm not sure about him in that game, but I think he's one of those guys that you're going to start anyway on a weekly basis no matter what the matchup, because the Detroit Lions, they throw the ball all over the field. And I think he's someone you should put in your lineups moving forward. And because, man, Marvin Jones is probably the top passing target, that is, for the Detroit Lions. But another receiver that had a great performance this weekend was on the Cleveland Browns. Yes, on the Cleveland Browns. And that is Terrell Pryor, the former quarterback from Ohio State and the Oakland Raiders. He made the switch to receiver, and, man, it has gone better. It hasn't gone any better than it has, because he had 144 yards on 14 targets. And the first game that Corey Kessler has started in the NFL, and he not only did he have receiving yards, he also threw it for 35 yards, ran it for 21 yards, got a touchdown on the ground, and if it counted, he got a snap at safety, and if it counted, man, oh man, Terrell Pryor, he looks like he's going to be one of those gadget players for the Cleveland Browns. And remember, Corey Coleman did get hurt. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. And Josh Gordon is going to be out for 1 more week. So Terrell Pryor is going to have another big game. I think he's going to have another big game this Sunday against the Washington Redskins. And he does play New England after that when Josh Gordon returns. So this week, for sure, I would try to start Terrell Pryor because they look like they're going to use him heavily in their offense. And Hugh Jackson, it looks like he likes Terrell Pryor as a big part in this offense, especially with the talent that's there at receiver. He was the most talented player on the field for the Browns on Sunday, and I expect that to happen again against the Redskins this week. But after that, Josh Gordon is coming back, so I don't know about him right there, but I would still add him into your team, insert him in the lineup this week, because the next week after that, I would just keep him on your team, probably bench him to see how, take the wait and see approach with Josh Gordon there. But he is someone that you guys have to add and probably start this week. And another receiver that had a great performance was Emmanuel Sanders. Yes, Emmanuel Sanders had a great game for against the Cincinnati Bengals, and against the Cincinnati Bengals, that is. And he had 117 yards on 13 targets for 2 touchdowns. And Trevor Siemian was also had a great fantasy game. Yes, he had 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards. So it looks like the offense is coming alive a little bit after we weren't sure about this offense for Denver. But, man, it looks like the offense is starting to improve a little more with Trevor Siemian and Emmanuel Sanders there. But he is someone that I would start next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they are playing the Falcons too. So he is someone that I will start for the moving forward, and I expect another great game from him again. And T.Y. Hilton is also someone that had a great game for the Indianapolis Colts, and he had 174 yards, 63 touchdown pass. Well, not pass, but catch from Andrew Luck, and that was his only touchdown in the game. But, man, he couldn't be caught when he got that ball, and it looks like T.Y. is a for sure start against a Jacksonville defense that has kind of struggled in a way this season. And Jordy Nelson is back, guys. 101 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for the Green Bay Packers. Yes, Jordy Nelson is back, and he's someone I would start moving forward, especially against someone like the New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, and Chicago Bears coming up in the schedule. He is someone that I am looking forward to. And other top performers in other positions, a quarterback position, Trevor Siemian, I talked about him briefly. He had over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns for the Denver Broncos against the Cincinnati Bengals. Matthew Stafford also had a great performance against the Packers. Drew Brees, who I talked about in the previous segment, and Jameis Winston, he had a good game against the LA Rams. He did throw for over 300, or should I say 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers was a man possessed on Sunday, throwing 4 touchdowns in the first half against the Detroit Lions. So, Aaron Rodgers is someone you're probably going to start. Drew Brees is someone you're going to start. But Matt Stafford, he's one of those fringe plays. But Trevor Siemian, wow, we did not expect that at all. And then top performance from the running back position. And, of course, I talked about Tevin Coleman, Devonta Freeman. But Carlos Hyde also had a great game. Got 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. They were in garbage time against the Seattle Seahawks. But he's someone that's very tough to trust just because of the team he's on. And he's someone he's someone you have to play with matchups. And I don't see him. I would probably give him a start against the Dallas Cowboys this week because they are a kind of like a mid-tier average defense. So I would start him against there, but after that, against the Arizona Cardinals on a short week, I'm not so sure about that one. And LaShawn McCoy had a good game against a great defense in Arizona, 2 touchdowns, and he had a heck of a game in the game that the Bills torched the Arizona Cardinals. And David Johnson, who also played in that game for the Cardinals, played a great role as well, as the Cardinals were trying to come back from a double-digit deficit, but they never did. And Christine Michael really ran all over the field against the 49ers. I didn't think they were going to stop him. I thought he was going to go for 400 yards rushing. With Thomas Rawls hurt, he is someone that you need to start on a weekly basis right now. Christine Michael has a top 5 fantasy running back potential, and he needs to be in your lineups moving forward as long as Thomas Rawls is out. And Jeremy Hill, someone else that maybe you should start moving forward, even though he is in kind of like in a committee there. He had a great performance. Great performance against the Denver Broncos. A good defense, that is. 2 touchdowns. And DeMarco Murray, he's someone that had a great performance this weekend as well against the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders they're not the best defense. They did play tough in that game. But DeMarco Murray, he looks like a different running back than he was with the Philadelphia Eagles last year. And he's not having the same great year he did with the Cowboys 2 years ago, but he's someone that looks like a surefire RB1. And it looks like Derrick Henry has taken a back seat a little bit. We thought Derrick Henry was probably going to emerge as a starter, but it looks like that is DeMarco Murray's job to lose. And those are the top performers from over the weekend. And when we come back from the second break, I'm going to talk about some top waiver wire pickups you guys need to look at to add to your team coming up here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And I'm going to talk about some waiver wire pickups you guys need to pick up for your team. And the first must-add, or I should say the only must-add for that matter, should be Jordan Howard, the Chicago Bears rookie running back. Jeremy Langford, it looks like he's going to be out for majority about 4 to 6 weeks. So Jordan Hayward becomes a must-add right now because he looks like he's going to get a lot of the carries. Even though he didn't do really well against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night, he did average 5 yards a carry, and he looks like he is going to be the guy there in Chicago. He is averaging 5.6 yards a carry this season. And he looks like he's going to get a lot of carries. And the schedule for the Bears right now moving forward is a Detroit Lions. They are going to play him this Sunday. And he's someone I can possibly maybe start there, maybe as your RB2 or the flex guy. He could emerge as an RB1 as season's end. Because Langford looked like he was struggling to replicate the same production that he did last year when Matt Forte got hurt. So it looks like Howard is the guy to own in the Chicago Bears backfield. And another must-add is Terrell Pryor. I talked about him previously on the last segment, but he's someone that I would start on my team this week because Josh Gordon's not there, and Terrell Pryor is going to be taking snaps all over the field. He's going to be playing quarterback, running back, receiver. He's a guy that's going to give you production in a variety of ways, and he's going to get some yards. And they look like they're going to utilize his athleticism a little bit. So he's someone that I would pick up right now, and I would start him against Washington Redskins if I were to add him today. And probably the third must-add is Orleans Darkwa, the running back for the New York Giants. Rashad Jennings looked like he can miss another week. And Shane Vereen is out for the entire year due to a triceps injury. And he's someone that I would love to add on my lineup right now because he's going to get a lot of carries this Sunday. The Giants do play Minnesota. Actually, they play on Monday night. They do play Minnesota next Monday. That is a tough defense. So I wouldn't start him. I will only start him as a flex at this point because that's a tough defense to play against. But he's someone that needs to be added in all formats. All formats that is. And this is going to be a surprising waiver wire pickup. But Cameron Brate, the tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Austin Safari-Jenkins is someone that's no longer on the team. Cameron Brate is the tight end there now. He did get 10 targets against the Rams. And he did have 5 receptions and 46 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he is someone that I will pick up on the waiver wire if you need tight end help, because there is a lot of teams that need tight end help, especially in a deep league. If you have a deep league in 12 to 14 leagues, he is a must-add in those leagues and 10-team leagues. Maybe you can have him there as depth, but if you do add him, I would not start him this week because he is playing the Denver Broncos, and he is playing the Carolina Panthers after that, but he's someone that should be looked at in some formats, especially in 12 to 14-team leagues. And Joe Flacco is someone that should be added this week, that is, because he is playing the Oakland Raiders at a defense that can't stop anybody. And Joe Flacco he didn't really have a good game against the Browns, or for that matter, I'm sorry, the Jacksonville Jaguars. He didn't have a good game against them. He did throw 2 picks, 214 yards. He didn't have a good game. He did have a great game against the Browns, and he did have a good game against the Bills. But he is someone that I will add if I need a quarterback help. He's a streamer for this week. He's playing the Raiders that can't stop anybody. The defense can't stop anybody. So I expect him to have a pretty big day there at home against the Raiders. And Jamison Crowder, he's someone I would look off the waiver wire as well. He does have 24 targets for the Washington Redskins. That's actually tied with Jordan Reed and Deshaun Jackson. So he's getting targets out there. Kirk Cousins is trying to throw to him. So he did have a pretty good game against the Giants on Sunday. He did have 78 yards. He did have a touchdown. And the week before that against Dallas, he did have a touchdown in that game too. So he has a touchdown in back-to-back games. He's someone I would look at as a third receiver, a flex option right there. And the Redskins schedule, they are playing the Cleveland Browns, so I would start him as a flex. And he's someone that could help out a lot of teams, especially guys that need receiver help in their teams. And he's someone that I will look to add as well. And like I said earlier, Jamison Crowder is tied for the team lead in targets, and that's 24. And Kirk Cousins, he's going to be throwing the ball a lot this season. It looks like that so far. He is in a division with a lot of weak defenses. So I expect Crowder to get some yards there. But he is the third option in that offense. behind Jordan Reed and Deshaun Jackson. Those are my top waiver wire pickups for week 4. And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning into the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And we'll be back here on Friday with Anthony will be here too. And we're going to be discussing the Thursday night football game. And we're also going to be discussing some players who can be sleepers this week and your must-start and must-sit players for next Sunday. But we'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. You can catch the show on a variety of formats: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and SoundCloud. You can also follow the show on Twitter at GSMC_F football. And you can also follow the Instagram account that is at GSMC_F football. And you can also like the show on Facebook. That is at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And don't forget about the website, people, GSMCpodcast.com, where you can catch this show, my football show, my baseball show, and any other shows on the network. Well, I'm Jeremiah Martinez, and I'll see you guys on Friday here at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast.